This is David Roach. I wanted to talk to you today about the changing nature of geopolitics. In a sense, what I'm going to say is that in the past, the influences on your life, feeling of security, your economic fortunes, and of course, market performance of your assets was much more closely linked to economics than to geopolitics. That has changed. The pilot of the plane is now geopolitics. The co-pilot is economics. Possibly even the passenger is economics. But you can look back at the last year and see how many things have changed for you and how many can be attributed to the changing shape of geopolitics. And you will know that geopolitics is now in control. So it's not the economy stupid, it's geopolitics, to rephrase the phrase. I wanted to redefine geopolitics. In the past, geopolitics was about configurations of nation states. Let's say A, B, and C, three nation states. If B and C allied and had enough weapons, they could rival A and prevent it from doing anything due to what we call in German the Gleichgewicht, balance of power. What I'm going to tell you now is that concept of geopolitics has changed. The principal reason it has changed is because of the politicization of vast tracts of the economy, which in the past were left to get on with their business of supply and demand, almost irrespective of what was happening in geopolitics. And that is no longer the case. If you go back to the beginning of this year, it is Putin who actually embargoed gas to Europe. That was the first instance of severe politicization of a swathe of economic activity. Europe got over it by being smart, despite its lack of cohesion, and purchasing enough LNG to replace Russian gas to carry it through the winter. But of course, this left many poorer countries short of LNG and short of energy. Now I want to discuss another factor. In the next couple of weeks, President Xi Jinping, COVID backtracking allowed, will visit Saudi Arabia. This is enormously significant because normally people come to visit Xi Jinping and not the other way around. I want to explain the other way around. Saudi Arabia is a country which is not terribly attractive. Its ruler, de facto, MBS, is strongly suspected of murder and many other heinous offenses when it comes to civil rights against his own people and others. Saudi Arabia has got no track record and no ambition in terms of civil rights or in terms of a democratic society or a legalized world order. Saudi Arabia used to follow the lead of the US, which gave it all the arms it needed. Not always for very justified wars. And in return, Saudi Arabia supplied the world market with oil at a price which served US interests in terms of its domestic and global economic reach. The biggest change in geopolitics is now about oil. MBS is stepping away from America, not just because Biden snubbed him, but because he seeks to redefine Saudi power. He has worked out that in X years, 30 maybe, the world will have done something about fossil fuel, and he and his people, or his administration to be more pertinent, will be in a less good place than they are today, when underinvestment in fossil fuels is likely to lead to booming fossil fuel prices over the next 5 to 10 years. So MBS has decided that he doesn't want to run his country on the basis of Saudi oil at cheap prices in return for American arms. And this is what the visit of Xi to Saudi Arabia is all about. Obviously, neither Xi nor Saudi Arabia want to have a load of currently highly discounted Russian oil on the market linked to Russian arms on the market, because the Russian arms don't work, neither the software nor the hardware. So the new deal is Saudi oil for Chinese arms, which, although quite unproven in many ways, like the Red Armies before its disastrous invasion of Ukraine, nevertheless, they enjoy a credibility untested by warfare, which Russia no longer does. Now, if you put this together with the fact that China and Saudi Arabia actually have a prescription for the world, which is this: democracy is dying because we're all either old and senile like me or decadent like youth, and that what will replace it will be authoritarian rule by terribly clever rulers like MBS and Xi Jinping, and the people will just love it. Essentially, what this takes is to do everything that is necessary, or everything rather that is possible, to diminish the power of democracies and of the old regime of either hegemonic or balance of power determined world order of a legalized sort. They want that out of the way. One way of doing this is to get rid of the US dollar. Now, there are a lot of people who have been trying to get rid of the US dollar as the kingpin or linchpin, rather, of the global financial system for the last 50 or 60 years without much noted success, except for the kind of rise of the euro, which then stopped as a percentage of global trade and financial flows. But if you start to reprice Saudi oil in renminbi and sell it to China under long-term contracts, which obviously would be stable, you have removed a significant brick or bunch of bricks from the wall of US dollar hegemony. And it will be seen as a step in the direction of replacing the US dollar as a global reserve currency. Now, frankly, if I were ruling one of these states which has no democratic traditions, no real interest in a legal world order, I would want to get rid of the US dollar too, or at least diminish its role as much as I could, because it is the hegemony and power of the US financial system which determines that of Europe, frankly, and which determines the weakness of all other rival systems. what really shifted both the need and the desire for foreign financial systems to get out of US dollars, if you are not a direct beneficiary from US dollars, like, for instance, I would say the euro-US dollar relationship is a beneficiary. But if you take China, or if you take Brazil, or if you take Indonesia or African states, then replacing the US dollar is a very good idea, principally because of what happened to the Russian central bank. So dump the ideology for a second and think for how central bankers feel in countries which suffer the same fate as the Russian central bank. In other words, do something silly militarily, do something unethical and immoral, and you wake up the next day and find that almost 60% of your foreign exchange assets have, to all intents and purposes, been confiscated. And those reserve assets had been built up as a cushion, as a buffer to insulate the economy from any negative impacts from trade sanctions or so on as a result of yet another Russian aggressive, offensive military act, which the invasion of Ukraine was. So they thought they had $600 billion there, and now they don't. They're all frozen. I think in the end, they will be devoted to the reconstruction of Ukraine. And that is all very well and good. But then you have to ask yourself, what happens to the world financial system if the majority of central banks, albeit small in totality compared to the big central banks of Bank of Japan, ECB, and the Fed, what happens if the majority of those central banks belong to countries which are ruled by people who are more similar to Xi Jinping and to Putin than they are to good old Joe Biden or whatever European Democrat you wish to hero worship? And the answer is that these central banks will, and we are about to find out by how much, look for a way in which to replace the dollar. Therefore, geopolitics has shifted. We are looking at new alliances forming in chaotic circumstances of the new world disorder between places like Saudi Arabia and China, or even that hopelessly weak economy, Russia and China, which are directly aimed at reducing the world order that we know, that we are comfortable with, and that determines our future existence. Goodbye, good night, and thank you for listening.